Okay, Roy, so let's get this little guy in there and down. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Cool. So because the tibials are hurting, let's sort of just stretch the foot. Hold the arm up for me. Yeah, they don't like that. They don't want to be stretched. They're too tight. Okay? So we're stretching the tibials out. Yeah, no, they definitely don't like that. So I'm going to do this push to mush. So anytime you've got muscle pain, the other thing you can do is push to mush and lengthen to strengthen. Push to mush and lengthen to strengthen. And that starts resetting the muscles in there.
So if I wake up at...
Yeah, so push to mush and lengthen to strengthen. So there's these little things called spindle cells in the belly of the muscles, and there's actually lots of little muscles that make up your tibials. So that just helps to reset them for stress and for tension and for your balance.
Yeah. I like it.
And hold. And hold. Cool. Let's just touch the bottom of the feet. Hold. Okay, well they weren't working last time, so that's a good improvement. Pull on your big toe muscle and hold. And hold. So that wasn't working last time, so that's an improvement. So let's get into your neck. I'll just I've got that stacked in, so I want to check your neck. So let's just give it
brain
a
little... or whatever.
your brain, yeah. It's funny, I was watching a Frasier episode. Did you ever watch Frasier?
I don't watch TV.
Yeah, right.
Frasier was a long time ago.
It certainly was.
When my brother was... I was looking after my brother. I bought him a TV.
Yeah.
And Frasier wasn't on me.
Well, there was a Halloween episode.
Wow.
Where,
wow.
There was a Halloween episode where Frasier dressed up as Dr. Freud, you know, because it was Halloween. So he dressed up as his hero. And, but all of the kids in the building where he worked, they were told by his dad that he would eat the kids' brains for Halloween. So every time they saw him, they'd all run away and scream and stuff. And so he was, they actually had this poem about him, Old Man Crane, something, and he'll eat your brain. So once again, give your neck a little bit of a stretch. And again, stretch. And again, stretch. And again, stretch. And also those cranial bones are really important to just make sure they stop being so jammed all the time. So when we're in trauma and stress, yes, the brain deliberately makes, the head is deliberately really jammed, okay, because it's about brain protection.
Yeah.
And part of it's because of the dura. So that dura is the part that's around your spinal cord, all the way from your tailbone, all the way up your spine, all the way over your skull, right down to your jaw. So when we've got pain in the head, that dura is really struggling. It's just jammed. It's trying to keep you protected. And your brain is in escape, submission, freeze. So with that stretching of the neck, your brain doesn't like it. It's going, leave me alone. I'm safe here, because it's about safety. That dura being compressed is about safety. So it causes body armoring. So then the muscles get really, really tight.
Yeah. And I can concentrate on it, etc. And, you know, Sean works on it and does good stuff. I'll walk out on cloud nine. But before I've gotten home, it's all come back.
Okay, so what do we need to do? Oh, okay. So the next priority is your throat chakra. So something about that is jamming your throat chakra.
Okay, thank you.
Mm.
That all fits.
Okay, so your throat works with your hyoid bone, this little guy in here,
Yeah.
as well as these, the parietal muscles. So those are too tight. It's probably part of the whole whoosh energy that you get. I'll just loosen up the muscles.
Yeah, so okay. This all goes back to when I was a kid.
Yeah, yeah, it will do.
Creepy.
Yeah. How was your immune system as a kid?
Can't remembering something like that.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't great. And I did suffer a few things.
Yeah.
Well, one of them, of course, I told you, my mother nearly killed me.
Yeah.
Infection.
So of course safety, you know,
Yeah.
you would have built up massive safety issues. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I've been listening to the interviews about that movie Sound of Freedom that's come out like on the 4th of July.
Oh, yes, I forgot about that.
We don't have it here in Australia yet. We'll have to
No.
wait, you know, so none of our cinemas have been brave enough to show it.
Yeah, there's, gee, that sort of stuff I just shake my head and think, what?
Yeah.
It's the same as the Aboriginal issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
I talked to these people and I said, oh, well, what are you going to vote? Got nothing to do with me. What do you know? What do you... Oh, I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? You're bloody Australian. Oh.
Yeah. I know, it's a bit nuts, isn't it?
Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, just the numbers they're talking about, you know, with the like the number of kids per year who are
Oh,
sold into it, and
it's
just horrific. There's
And
some
like-
good souls on the planet trying to solve it though, so
Yes.
fingers crossed, you know.
yeah. And you know, for I don't know how many years now, I've been getting the Courier Mail, the Aboriginal newspaper,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, I'm trying to tell people, well, how are you want to see the other side of the story?
Yeah.
And you know, no, that's biased and all that. I think no, you're biased. You so
Yeah.
fool. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a guy who's gone a bit viral because he was at a meeting of a whole bunch of major newspapers over in the States. And he just stood up as a concerned citizen and sort of said, you've got everything wrong over the last 20 years. And he sort of listed all the major things that after 3, 4, 5, 10 years have been proven to be false. And but the newspaper guys have got their, you know, they've got their awards, they've got their Peabodys, they've got, you know, they've got all these major awards, and no one ever takes the awards off them and says, oops, I was wrong for 5 years about this war. Oops, I was wrong about this particular thing. Oops, I was wrong about, you know, they don't come out and say anything.
Yeah.
Anyway, it sort of was funny because not a single one had anything to do to correct him. So of course they kicked him out.
Well, on the upside, I last well, no, earlier this week, I had to call Tyke Health to get a script for my whatever it was. And I spoke to Andy Cohen. No, he called me. So it was a telephone consultation. And I said I wanted to try cutting down on the sleeping tablets. So not sleeping tablets, circadian tablets.
Yes.
Mel-
Like melatonin.
Melatonin.
Yeah.
And he said, well, hang on, hey, what? And I said, no, do you know Sia? Oh, the name is Sia.
Yeah.
And he said, yes, I do.
Yeah.
And I said, well, yeah, I wanted to try the mood and drink and the tablets. Oh, good. Well, let me know what the result is.
Nice.
And there is a doctor that's
Cool.
he and Dan open, because I saw Dan about my regular doctor's Denton Wade, and I don't know why I stuck with him, but Dan, I talked to Dan about cannabis oil,
Mm-hmm.
and he says, yeah, well, he says, you know, that as a doctor I can't,
Hold.
but
Hold. Oh, good.
to my customers, the Gold Coast, 2 old ladies, they take this stuff and works with it in the quantity.
Yeah.
And well, he's prepared to talk about it, and he's not saying don't do it. And
Yeah,
blah,
yeah.
blah. And yeah.
Well, I'm still surprised that my brother is a GP. He's a moron. So last week he said to me that as long as people eat well, they will get all the vitamins and nutrients they need, and you don't need supplements. And I just, after 30 years of me doing this, I can't believe he still claims that as a doctor.
Yeah.
Charles Krebs, actually, he did a study. No, he didn't. He told the story about a study where they asked doctors at the beginning of their medical career what they believed about natural therapies, or no, not natural therapies, about nutrition. And what a surprise, about 80% before going into medicine believed that nutrition was important for health. At the end of the study, it was way under 20%. So they are deliberately taught throughout the training that nutrition is not important.
I can't remember if I've told you this, but when I was up in far north Queensland, I organised these little I ran an open house, and I'd organised these little get-togethers with doctors and nurses and alternative health practitioners. Get them and sit down and talk like people. And these 2 guys said they were, what do you call them, interns or they'd been sent to the Cairns Base Hospital, and they said the food was shit.
Yeah.
And they said they went to, the 2 of them, went to the director or the boss man.
Yeah.
And said, look, how can you expect people to get better on this diet? And this guy turned around and said, you pull your heads in or you'll lose your jobs.
Where was that?
Cairns Base Hospital.
Yeah, I've got a cousin who's been up there for 20 years.
Oh,
She's
okay.
just as much a moron as my brother.
Yeah, well,
They've been so indoctrinated, they've got zero idea about health.
But
they're just taught the disease model.
Yeah, but they've got, what about their own thinking? Their own brain?
Yeah, but that's being crazy. You can't think like that. You certainly can't recommend it to your clients. I remember 20 years ago, Jimmy saying to me that he just doesn't talk nutrition to his clients anymore because no one pays attention. Like, he said that to me like 20 years ago because he used to try to get people to eat clean and, eat fruit. Like, he actually had this person who was addicted to KFC, and they just kept getting sick over and over and over again. And Jim sort of said, well, you really need some, fresh fruit and vegetables and some fresh meats and some fresh, you need to clean up your diet and drink lots of water. So they started feeling better and then said, when can I go back to my normal diet?
Oh boy.
So he doesn't even bother anymore. And I think that's where doctors get to. They just don't bother.
I don't understand any of it, but
People are crazy. People are lazy. They do.
well,
We've
yeah,
been taught to want the quick fix, haven't we?
yeah.
You have a tumour, you rip
That's
it
exactly
out.
what you're brought up with.
Mm.
And when I started seeing a Chinese doctor, I had to say, look, this is really difficult coming from a Western. Even though I had, felt I had an open mind and I was much more interested in looking for the truth.
And it's that pill for every ill. We're taught to think like that.
Yeah.
And isn't it cool that like there's some big conversations going on about it now that haven't ever gone on before. Like with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. In the States, like he's really just laying it on the line. His book, was amazing.
Yeah, I was tempted to buy it, but I've got books that I haven't read.
It's really heavy. It's really heavy.
Of course it is.
Because it's just page after page after page. And one of my clients was in the other day, and she's in her late 60s. And she's become quite depressed, realising how much she was sucked in. And she's a real natural person, she goes natural all the way. But she can see how she's still, even though she's been natural her whole life, how much, you still believed about the whole big pharma industrial complex. Like it really has been just filled with shenanigans for a long time.
Yeah, and I was talking about my mate Paul, and every now and then he says that I piss him off because he comes to me with something that he thinks is new.
Yeah.
And I said, man, I was thinking about that when I was a kid. And now I've forgotten what I was going to say.
Yeah, no. So you've always been open.
And I actually thank my parents for it, that as a result of what they did, I was always curious about what the truth was, without knowing that was what was going on. I just knew this wasn't right.
Yeah.
And was always looking, sort of style. But in the 70s, Theo and I were friends, and we were on the same
wavelength.
Yeah. And he introduced me to a hell of a lot of really good writings and understandings and things like I'm just starting to retouch with. People who can see, who are blind but can see.
Yes.
So I remember him introducing me to that idea back in the 70s. I think it was in Israel. And there was a bunch of kids. And I know with my own experimentations, I thought I could teach myself to see with my eyes closed.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And once I got to, I reckon I could do it, because with chronic fatigue, you can't stick to any one thing for very long because you've got other bigger issues to deal with. That's just one thing, and like the stuff.
Have you heard of Dr. What's his name? Beresden, Dr. Bredesden. He's a guy who started he's a functional medicine doctor in the States. And about 10 years ago, he came to fame because he put together a 36-point process for reversing Alzheimer's or dementia or something like that. Have you heard of him?
No,
Dane Bredesden, anyway, whatever his name is. But what he actually did is looked at people as an individual. So he would get people to do a whole bunch of genetic checks. He'd get all their blood sugars done. He'd get work out, do full on cardiovascular stuff. He'd do brain scans. He would just look at each person as an individual.
Yeah.
And then he would put together the 10 most important things, but he would say, I want you to focus on 3 things this week. 3 things. And so then for 1 week, they would focus on one thing, whether it's, 20 minutes of sunshine morning and night, whether or not it was making sure we drank 2.5 litres of apple cider vinegar or lemon water, or whether or not it was, whatever it was for the people. And the people chose themselves. This is what I'm willing to do this week. I'll walk 5Ks a day, or I'll eat 2 cupfuls of veggies every day. And then, of course, bit by bit, some of those things become the habit. And then you start adding in another thing and another thing. And so he reverses 80% of his clients' Alzheimer's.
Shit. Yeah. I know, I won't go back and do it, but I'll be keeping my eye open for it next time I go back through those papers. Because I didn't read the article. It was an article that I said to myself, I've got to go back and read that. And it was about Alzheimer's not being caused by any one thing and
Yeah.
blah, 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 blah.
And a lot of the time it's called stage 3 diabetes, because it's the long-term result of our imbalances with our blood sugar, which is basically poor diet, so that eventually our excess sugars eat away our brain tissue, which might be linked in with that whole estrogen thing I mentioned earlier. So women, for example, get something like 8 times more multiple sclerosis than men.
Oh, yeah.
So if we are running out of estrogen in menopause,
Yeah.
and then we don't convert out, so it's that lack of estrogen. So I wonder about men who don't have good testosterone, because in the last 50 years, it's halved twice general levels of testosterone. So it halved, I think in 1970, it had halved the average, because what they do, blood tests. So it was basically because the states, I think it was, they had so many decades and decades and decades of testosterone levels. So they simply looked at the testosterone levels for, say, the 20 years before 1970, and then at 1970, and it had halved. And the same thing happened again in about 2000, and now it's happened again in 2020. So we're just destroying the hormone levels of humans on the planet with all these xenoestrogens and, all the plastics, the BPAs, the endocrine disruptors, the pesticides, the herbicides, the genetic modification. Yeah, it's all a bit crazy.
Yeah, well, I know some people, they're just not, I don't know why they live it.
Mm-hmm. Because they don't want to be here, or because their lifestyles are so bad?
No, because their lives are so small.
Yeah, right.
They don't look, like I talk to people, okay, you mentioned plastics.
Yeah.
So, I can't remember how many decades ago, scientists were beginning to be, nobody takes notice of the scientists for whatever reason.
Yeah.
The scientists were becoming concerned about the polar bears, and they weren't sure that there were different factors, but they didn't know exactly what it was that was going on. And that doing filming them, etc. And then I can't remember how long ago. This was within the last decade, maybe within 5 years. They noted that the polar bears were going further south. Now, they came south a little bit to eat berries, but now they're coming further south, so that as a result, they were mating with brown bears, grizzly bears.
Really?
And the same gene pool. And so they have now had far more growler bears
Yeah.
than they ever had. What the
Right.
hell's going on? And they found that what it was, that the polar bears' preferred food was the Wengal seal, or I can't remember which seal it is. But when they checked the seal, its blubber was full of bloody plastic.
Oh, wow.
And the plastic was accumulating in the polar bears, and that was what was making them crook. And then
You know, and I know a lot of people who sort of say, well, that's why I'm vegan, because I want to avoid all the animal products that have got all the build-up of this stuff in. But they're just, you know, vegans are just as unhealthy because everything's in the pesticides and the herbicides, and so much of it is genetically modified. And,
goes on.
you know, it goes on and on and on.
And I remember back in the 70s reading about Santos Montana, I think it was, and how they'd wrecked little countries.
Yeah.
You bastards.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And did you know that it was in the late 1890s when they started giving BPAs to women for menstrual issues? So they knew that it affected women's brains and hormones in the late 1890s. So then in the 1970s and 80s, when plastic just became ubiquitous, they already knew the effects of it from like 60 years earlier.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Jesus.
Turdy butt-butts.
Hmm?
Turdy butt-butts.
Just goes on.
It goes on and on. And there was that little old guy who, I think he was like 93. He took the FDA to court recently for trans fats. So trans fats that are inflammatory, that have been in our food supply for 110 years. So because he has done 50 years of research that the FDA in America had ignored, finally, like I think it was this year or last year, it was really recently, he took the FDA to court and he won. They've been negligent, and that's just trans fats. That's 1 out of 1 million toxins that are in our foods. And they couldn't argue it because there's decades and decades and decades of proof about trans fats being cancer causing.
So that's a little bit like David Gillespie. But
with the sugar. Yeah.
And
people don't care.
World Health Organization have to change their policy because something that what?
I know. And absolutely crazy.
Oh.
And hold. And hold. And hold. Beautiful. There you go. Yeah, so, with that neck, like the throat did keep showing up, and then in relation to the brain. So your central meridian gets jammed whenever your throat chakra isn't doing well. So you know how we were talking about running the central meridian? Actually, I wonder if I've got a little handout I can give you. I think I've got a little handout that I created a little while ago with some basic, sort of little brain pickups. I'll give you that.
Anything that...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll find that for you. But, so it's sort of like that throat chakra. Once again, I wonder about spraying the ASEA on your throat as well occasionally, because I'm sure your throat chakra showed up last time. So you can use it, of course, thinking about your chakras as well. Your brow chakra, your throat chakra. Sort of giving it a spray energetically. Base chakra was out as well. But, of course, we were talking about, trauma and stuff too, so no surprise it ended up showing its head. There you go, Mr. Roy, as Renergy would say.
Yeah. I didn't know where she came up with that.
It's so cool. Thank you.
And these little kids running, Mr. Roy, Mr. Roy.
Mr. Roy, Mr. Roy.